Wow, I just had the best conversation with Mark Platten. If you know anyone who is in midlife as a couple or as a single who is dealing with menopause or male menopause, this is a conversation that they need to hear. Welcome. I'm Deborah of the Better Sex Podcast. I'm so excited to have Mark as a guest. And we dove into a really deep conversation about the changes that happen hormonally and emotionally in midlife and how to navigate them. So I hope you will listen and share it widely. And I'd love to hear how this works for you. So please feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Sex Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationship. Please listen with care, as these conversations are raw and honest and may not be appropriate for all audiences. Today, my guest is Mark Platten, the founder of the Integral Man Institute. He's been leading men's groups since 2003 and has guided countless men through rites of passage, from fatherhood to elderhood. Mark's work is rooted in the lived experience walking through life with his wife's decade-long menopausal journey, while having his own challenges. He is the father of 5 sons, the grandfather of 9, and has a lot of experience in the relationship realm, personally and professionally. And I am delighted to dive in today. So first of all, Mark, how did you get here? Like men's work, relationships, what's your story? How did you find this work?
Well, that's a really great question. I'm going to call you Kat 1,000 times in this conversation, as we've mentioned before, Deborah, that I've got two friends whose names are Kat, and so because your last name is Kat, I keep pulling that. That is what seems to hanker in my peripheral and in my kind of brain there. So, to your question, what got me here? I think being human. I mean, literally being human got me here. The process of what we do in life, of showing up and having relationships, and then having children. As you mentioned, I've got 5 boys. Our youngest is 23, our oldest is 44, and then 9 grandchildren in the mix there as well. And on that life journey, there are parts and times that all of a sudden something pops up that's like, this is something that's important to do. And so 20-some years ago now, I felt called into men's work. I don't even remember what it was, other than I know that I was working on a PhD in men's divinity. And so I was going around, I live in Colorado Springs, and I was going around the state and looking in surrounding states, looking for what men's groups were out there, gathering all the books and articles and so forth that were written around men's work, and trying to kind of get a feel for what this men's journey was, not just within myself, but the lived experience kind of what life was asking of us as men in kind of the current stage. And in that process of doing the research on it, I came across the realization that I'm doing this men's work. I'm writing this dissertation on men's work, and I had never created and led a men's group. And so I think that would be the natural first place to go, not the last place to go. But that's what I did. And so I started several men's groups, and through that process of several years of anchoring them in and understanding what was going on with men and doing rites of passage and programs and courses and on with that, there came a time where I heard that voice that I call spirit, the sacred, the holy, whatever you want to call it, that said to me, Mark, you're doing really good work, and it's time to set down the men's work. Your father is still alive. You don't have any gray hair. My father passed almost 3 years ago now, And if you're looking at this and reviewing this, I've got my ample abundance of gray in my hair and beard. So interestingly enough, 4 or 5 years ago, I got the call back into, not that I hadn't been doing any men's work, but this is where it became a primary focus again for me. And so that's kind of how I got here and where I am right now, and why this is really calling to me to do this work, especially around men in midlife and their partners who are going through perimenopause or menopause.
Thank you. So I've got a couple questions. First of all, I'm so curious. Your grandchildren, do you have granddaughters? Or are they all sons?
No, we've got three granddaughters and a fourth on the way. So that's the ninth one who will be here in just a couple of weeks. But probably by the time this episode is out, we'll have our ninth grandchild. So yeah, we'll have four granddaughters.
So I'm really curious, and because basically a lot of what we're talking about today is based on of your wife's menopausal journey. But I'm curious, like, how having granddaughters changed your connection to the feminine or your connection to women.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we didn't have the blessing. I mean, I certainly love all of our boys, and there's that gift that young daughters bring into I think a father's heart that softens them in a really different way than what the boys do. At least through my experience and through a lot of my lived experience of other friends and family and so forth. And so what has been nice with my granddaughters is that ability to our youngest granddaughter right now, she's 7, and she calls me Pop Pop, and she's got me wrapped around her finger. So
as they do.
That's right, as they do, right. And so it's this interesting place of softening in a different way, of seeing the world through a different lens. And it's not, I think we all have, in my experience, the balance of masculine and feminine. We're all on a spectrum of that. And I don't think it's directed toward a particular sex per se. We all have elements of that divine feminine and divine masculine. We have a spectrum that we can step in any situation. Sometimes I'm called into a very, very strong masculine warrior mode, and sometimes I'm called into the softer, more lover archetype, if you will, and go in the softer, more gentle, receiving, open roles. And I think my granddaughters do that for me, is really help soften me in and be more receptive of love in a different way than I receive from my sons and my grandsons.
Beautiful, thank you. That's such a sweet. I notice as men start to relate differently to the women in their lives when they have young girls, daughters, granddaughters, whatnot. And I love what you're talking about, this softening, this connecting in with the lover archetype. I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about the archetypes in just a moment. But one of the things when you mentioned your dissertation was on was it the divine masculine or the divine man? So did that come in through a theological point of view, or?
Yes, it was. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it was definitely through a theological seminary program, through New Mexico Theological Seminary that I was doing some work through, and I actually never completed it. Again, while I was laying everything down, where I got that message, it's not like parts of what I was doing had to set down. It was like everything needed to be set down. So I sat it all down. And yeah, it's, again, why was I called to do the men's divinity work? I had been doing a lot of sacred, what I call sacred work, a lot of indigenous studies, a lot of ceremonials, a lot of ancient studies and so forth. And for whatever reason, what kept coming up for me and what I kept being kind of magnetized toward was to the masculine, the divine masculine. So when I found this particular PhD program, I was like, okay, that is what this is what's calling to me.
Well, that makes sense, because I know one of the big things that you're passionate about is working with rites of passage and working with transitions. And that brings us to the transition of menopause and what that does to relationships.
Yeah, it's for those who are in it. There, I don't have to tell you anything, and it's a for men in midlife, we don't often talk. We know this thing called menopause is out there,
Mm-hmm.
but we really have no idea because it's one of those things. I talk about this all the time. That our two taboos in the United States are sex and death.
Mm-hmm.
So since we don't talk about those tend to be the things that we have a lot of issues and challenges and problems and healings that should focus around that. So the midlife process, if we don't know anything about menopause, other than it's a term and we know that our partner will, or wife or spouse will be going through that sometime. We're not even sure when because we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
The average onset is somewhere in the mid-40s, and the ending of it, which you call, so perimenopause is what most people consider menopause. Menopause is where women haven't had a cycle for a full year.
Mm-hmm.
That is what the true menopause is. We don't realize that the average onset is mid-40s. The average age of completion of the menopause process is early 50s. So we're talking a multiple year journey. And this is where it becomes, I think, for men, I'll speak for myself. For me, it became a challenge in so many areas because different than, let's say, the monthly moon cycle, where you know that for 3, 4, 5 days, if your partner has some extreme cycles, then there may be 4 or 5 days that they just need space.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that they're going to be emotional maybe, or needing different, just different energy around that to hold them in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's done, it's done. When women are pregnant, we know that there's a 9-month cycle. That we know what that looks like. We can see it unfolding. We can see the physical, child in the belly, and it's a reminder that there's something happening here. And we know when that projected time frame is, or what it's going to be close to.
Mm-hmm.
With menopause, we don't know when it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So what we oftentimes were kind of, for both, I think, women and men, at least from my experience, is that women have things that are going on and they, that are probably perimenopausal symptoms, but we're writing it off as stress,
Mm-hmm.
as, just the jobs, as family, as, whatever else is going on. For instance, my wife had 3 sessions of panic attacks. I mean, extreme panic attacks in the middle of the night. And so we got up and it's like, so my wife, she was worried about her heart. She just had this just all this energy. My heart was beating really fast. And so let's go to the hospital. I don't know what's sure wrong. They run all the tests. Nothing happens. It's like, well, we don't know what that is. Talking to other women, older women who deal with menopause on a daily basis, what their thing was like, oh yeah, this is one of the symptoms of menopause, of being in that preliminary perimenopausal stage. But nobody talks about that. We didn't know this. We were just, my wife thought she was having a heart attack. I have no idea what's going on. There's no results to come back. So now you're in the question of what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes very challenging because it can come on somewhat subtly, like things do, and it's not constant. And then all of a sudden it kind of gears up, and now you're in it, but you still don't know what it's about, and you don't know about conversations. And for me, I was bringing. So this show of yours is about sex and better sex and those kind of things. So I was bringing tools that I had from I call my princely phase of life. So the early 20s through the 30s, let's say. So that time frame, which are what I would call princely behaviors, princely energies, princely tools. Just so we have our young boy tools.
Mm-hmm.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There are things that are young boys that you set down when you become these young men, these young princes. And then you get into relationship and you have children and you go through that phase and you navigate that decades-long worth journey. And then comes midlife
Mm-hmm.
and perimenopause and menopause with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another phase. And we want to bring these same tools that we used back when we were in the prince phase into the king role here, and they don't work. They trying to fix, trying to logic my way through something, trying to be the knight in shining armor and show how valuable I am. And my wife didn't need any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt victimized I felt like, number one, I felt like I was not valuable to her anymore because what I normally brought that she was all excited about, and then I was like this amazing man, which I was bringing the wrong tools into the conversation, into the relationship. I needed to upgrade that, but I had no idea what to do or how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I've never spoken about that, shared that with me. None of the older men in my circle had any awareness of what that was. And so what many of them did was tell me that their wives just went crazy during this time frame. And some of them got divorced during that, some of them by the wife making the decision, and some of the men making the decision and jumping out. And so this place of better sex starts with better communication and better tools, better connection, better ways of how we come together to connect. And then really being honest with each other. So the same things that are going on for women in midlife for men are happening as well. Starting in our 30s, we have testosterone dropping. So we go through what's called andropause, which if we don't talk about menopause, most people never heard the word andropause. And that's essentially the male menopause journey, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Testosterone drops. Where in that place we'll have things such as hair loss. Our midsection will get rounder. We have maybe some cognitive disability. We can't remember things. We don't have as much energy. We don't have as much what we call maybe in the men's work fire in the belly.
Mm-hmm.
That we do in our 20s and 30s, where that testosterone is we're just on fire. We can stay up and just drive and battle and do those things. It's not there as much anymore, and it's often not there in the bedroom as well. And you may have some ED issues going on, and so it's like now you've got this interesting thing. You've got menopause on your spouse's side, where her body is changing, and she may not like what's happening to her because of how society values a woman's body. So if she's putting on weight, she may not like what she looks like in the bedroom, and maybe feels like we as men don't value her or don't like what she's showing up as. And there's also, again, the challenge with the physiological changes in menopause and perimenopause as the factory, if you will, starts to shut down, as the vaginal walls dry and thin. Sex can be more difficult for women. Sex may take longer for them to get aroused, for women to get aroused. At the same time, where men in the midlife are having challenges maybe getting it up, and maybe challenges keeping it up. And so the women need more time, the men need less time to make that happen. And so what you end up happening is this, men won't engage because they may not think they can even complete, or that their spouses are even there, or that they have to do all this extra work to get there, and they're not being appreciated.
Right.
So much of sex is about the emotional connection. It's not just the physical, and that's where I think oftentimes we make mistakes, is thinking it's all about just the physical. So if my partner if my wife doesn't feel safe, and she feels like all I want is just the physical act, it's extra hard for her to feel safe, supported, and held, and that I really want to be with her, and not just somebody to get my jollies, to release.
I think this is a really important point that you're bringing up, because I think that sex is so misunderstood. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that sweeping generality here, but one of the biggest mistakes that we often make is this idea that, men, when they come to sex, what they're looking for is the climax and the get off. And yes, that is very pleasurable. And in my work, and this may be true, I'd love to hear what you've experienced, but in talking to couples and men, and one of the things that they value is the other side of climax, the other side of that place where they can be held, and they can, there's pillow talk. And I know for me, when I grew up, the stereotype or the meme was that, there'd be sex and then there'd be napping. Right? And I never actually found that to be true. I found there to be, climax, and then there was pillow talk. And there was time for sharing in a way that oftentimes is super clumsy and sometimes sounds like, was it good for you? Um, but as I've in my own experience and that with my clients, as I've sort of led into like, how can this conversation be a little different? Like, how can this conversation be more of a, you know, that was amazing and this was really hot and this is what I really enjoyed with that. And, you know, something that is very complimentary, not debrief. You don't necessarily need to debrief it, but holding that space of appreciation in that moment. And I think, again, like this idea that all we come to sex for is physical release is just not true on either side of the equation there from what I've experienced. We have this idea that I think people come to sex for so many different reasons. They come for that place of appreciation, they come for that place of safety, they come for that place of vulnerability. Allowing seeing each other naked can be such a vulnerable thing. Not to mention all of the everything that happens when we're having sex, which never looks like the movies. It's always more. Let me rephrase that. It's often more awkward. There's often more fluid. It's often more like, strange things happening, phones ringing, whatever. And so just really having that opportunity to allow it to be connection no matter what. And going back to what you were saying, to what started this idea that men just want to, just want that sexual experience. It's like one of the things that I see really stopping connection from even happening is that oftentimes women are afraid that if they respond positively to that flirt, to that kiss, to that, that suggestion, those arms around as you're doing the dishes, whatever, that it's going to escalate to a place that, of no return. And sometimes it does, and oftentimes, at least with my clients, one of the things I hear is it's like they're not actually looking for that. Yes, it's fine. It's good if it happens. And they're looking for that response and that connection with their partners. And I'm curious, if you have an observation around that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting observation there, Deborah, that so when I talk about the Integral Man Institute, so we're talking integral meaning whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I see that we, men and women, come to a relationship in usually one of four ways. And for men, the driving force oftentimes is the physical. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's really the physical drive that gets them there. Sometimes it's the mental, but that they really appreciate it, like, oh my God, this woman is so incredibly intelligent, that turns me on. Sometimes it's the emotional, it's like, I can go so deep with this person. Sometimes it's the spiritual, it's like, and that's where my wife and I primarily came together 26 years ago now, is through the deep spiritual connection that we had together. And then the others, so that has held us together when the physical hasn't been there, when then maybe mental has been, a bit challenging, even when the emotional has been, especially going through menopause and so forth. For me, it was the understanding and the knowledge that at the deepest core level of ourselves, it was our deep spiritual rooted connection to the most whole being of who I am and who she is. I know her and recognize her as that sacred being. So when we make sex and relationship, more important, we make a relationship only one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
If it's only about sex, well, that's a recipe for disaster, because eventually, as we age, that may not be the thing. And if that's all you're after, relationships can be very empty, can feel very lonely, can feel very, and so you may, as a man, jump out of it, or as a woman too. There are some women who are much more. I mean, we tend to think men, and I think that's true. I think the statistics are that the couples who have the most sex are gay men couples, and those who have the least are the lesbian couples.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the testosterone drives so much of that just natural desire for sexual activity, which is, so your conversation, getting back to your conversation about how do I experience that and what's my experience with that from other men and so forth, is it just the physical expression that men are looking for, and that, that release, or is there more to it? I think absolutely there's more to it. I think certainly as we're younger, higher testosterone is going to be driving the show. I mean, it's just really is part of it's biological.
Mm-hmm.
As we get older, that testosterone drops. This is where it gets really interesting, right? So the women, so now where men are getting softer, not just physically, but softer emotionally. Softer. Again, that fire in the belly is softening. There's not as much drive. There's not as much endurance. There's not as much. So there may be more of the, hey, I'm unable to perform tonight, and so I'm going to be doing some pillow talking kind of stuff too. And also, it may not be as frequent, so there may be some more willingness to have conversation, and especially if you have like families together, children together, and life together, that it's not just that the aspect of physical connection is a deepening when you it's not just physical. When you go and activate the emotional and the intellectual and the spiritual components and make it this full experience, that then leaves it open to having that, like you said, the pillow talk or the really deeper conversations that can happen afterward.
Mm.
Yeah.
Nice, thank you. And I know with folks that I work with, I often will have the conversation with them about like, hey, so how can you notice each other's signals a little better, right? So how can you let each other know like, hey, I really, in the flirting piece, I'm enjoying you, and I'm wanting more of this, and wherever it goes, I'm open to. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, Deborah, again, I think it comes back to that communication piece, and if we're not speaking to each other, if we're again using the same old cues, if the methodology that I used when I was 22, if that's, if whatever my lines were, whatever my cues were then, which were much different than, after, raising children and grandchildren and going through life and having illnesses and all those other things that come in. If I'm still using those same things, I might want to again look at that. And really truly comes down, and I'm going to keep reiterating this. It's like, can you be in conversation with your partner instead of just hoping that they guess correctly what's going on for you? And it's tough, right? Because as men, to talk about anything that is about us being vulnerable means somebody's going to come and get my man card from me. It's like, hey, Mark, give me that back. You're talking about things that are out of the realm of being a man, and yet I say there's nothing more powerful for a man or for his partner, for him to be vulnerable, not in a weak way, because there's a vulnerability of I have no idea, no control, no drive, no North Star that's pointing me, or being really anchored and centered and grounded and being able to speak to truth of, hey, this is going on for me. I respect and love you, and I want to continue this relationship. This is what's important for me. I want to be able to meet your needs as well. Can we have a conversation? Let's talk about this, because my intention is to be with you for the lifetime, or whatever that looks like, right? And so to make that happen requires adapting, changing, growing together. And my wife and I had that conversation early on with us, that we knew, in our heads we were talking. Again, I'd done so much men's work and work around that, and deep spiritual work. It's like, we know we're going to age. We know that we can't rely on just the physical, as great as it is early on when we're younger. We can't let that be the bedrock of who we are and the foundation of our relationship, because the likelihood is that won't be as poignant as we get older. If my wife had some illness challenges here 4 or 5 years ago, and the last thing on her mind was having sex. Did she want to be held and paid attention to and listened to and comforted, and did she want to know that I was going to be by her side in the hospital? Absolutely. Is that the most important thing for me then? Absolutely. And so with life, Well, I've still my whole journey with, I think, almost all my journey with men's work, except for most recently, which is really interesting, which has kind of made my shift in the last few years. But up until the last few years, almost all the men's work I've done, most of the men in the groups, even though I was leading, were 15 to 20 years and so forth ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm in a men's group that a lot of the men in there are 80. I'll be 60 in a year. So a lot of the men in that group are 80 to 85. And the stories that I'm hearing from them are important for me as a man to understand what's coming ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I speak that to them. It's important for them to give me a vision, a good vision, of what I can grow into. Because I'll move from this king phase, I'll move from this phase where I'm using this set of tools here into what I consider the elder phase, which requires a whole nother set of tools. And it's a whole nother phase of our life as human beings. We unfortunately want to stay stuck, as men I'll say, in our 20, early 30-year-old self. We want to stay stuck in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we all have this physical outside vessel that's out here that has a particular age to it. Then we have this interior age that's going on in there. I like asking men, what age is your interior world? What age is that lens of how you see and experience the world? What age is that? And it's always fascinating to see where men are. Many of them are stuck in that, they're stuck in that phase of life.
Funny hearing you say that. The first number that popped into my head was 32. And I know exactly, that was such an incredibly pivotal year. It was like, I was definitely out of the maiden. I was, in the mother. I was definitely in a very different place. And that switch, and I think it's hard. I'm just noticing for myself right now, it's oh, wow, it's been really a challenge to step into the newer phases. And yet, the more that I'm willing to kind of go okay, let's see what this is here, the more expansive it is. And, as I'm hearing you talk, the other thing is it's when we talk about the archetypes that we've been talking about, the page, the knight,
Yeah, in the men's work, it's typically done around the king, magician, warrior, and lover. And within those four primary, and it's a really good. There's more in there than just those four. But those 10 in a lot of the primary men's work out there, those are the four, because it creates a really solid container. We throughout history and all kinds of stuff, indigenous cultures, the number 4 is a very sacred, stable thing. So we've got the 4 directions, we've got the 4 elements, so 4 is a grounding, solid element. So within those. Yeah, go ahead.
There seems to be this, and maybe I'm not it's entirely possible that I don't understand the king as much as I would like to, but it's there's the king, and then there's the older king, or the elder king, and that feels really different as you're talking.
Right. And that's what I was saying, Deborah, is exactly that what I'm using here, and really the way I look at it, that there's the juvenile phase of each of those phases of each of those 4 archetypes. There's the juvenile phase of the king, which is a tyrant, right? There's the juvenile stage of the warrior, which is the warrior who just dominates and goes out there and rapes and pillages and destroys because it can. There's also the king phase of the warrior, which is the protector, which is the guy, which is the protector not just of those that he likes, but that is his job, is to protect, to hold second, and not to fight unless you need to. Right? So a king, the king phase, a mature phase, and I'll use the king, the mature phase of that warrior, is not what we're seeing expressed in our through my belief. And again, this is just Mark's belief. Is not what we're seeing in the United States right now. We've got a very juvenile viewpoint of that masculine warrior archetype that's being expressed out there, as though this is what we as men are supposed to be. So the king shows up in the lover. The king shows up in the magician. So, and the juvenile phases of those show up. Now, the juvenile phases aren't necessarily bad. There's the pros and cons in each of those. The dark side and the light side in each of those. You can be, again, a benevolent king, or you can be the tyrant who just, I'm in charge and I do whatever I want.
Hmm.
Those are really different reflections of a king, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And of course there's the flip side of that where there is the, more juvenile, more mature version of that for the feminine.
Right.
And it's so interesting. This could be a whole other rabbit hole, so I'm going to pause myself. I'm going to put it out, then I'm going to pause myself for just a moment because I do see, like, when we talk about these different archetypes, particularly out in popular culture right now, the acknowledgement of the light and the dark, or the juvenile and the mature, is not as present as I would prefer. And I think, as we were talking earlier, this idea that relationship, is not only is it a foundational piece of how we operate in society, but it's also foundational in our own personal transformation. And I'm wondering, you've touched on this and talked about this a little bit already, but the idea that the transformation that is available within relationship as we move through these different phases. And I'm curious, like, we do hear more about the menopausal changes in women than we do in men. And I just really want to kind of highlight and allow you to talk a little bit more about that transition.
Yeah, I think it's your statement earlier, Deborah, about that you are now looking at your own place of stepping into that new role. I think there's a certain clinginess that we have. We want to hold on to that more youthful place because, again, whether you're men or women have it. I would say women are like, well, we're certainly in the Western culture we give lots of value to the looks of a woman, right, and what a woman is supposed to look like and how she's supposed to respond and show up. Men have some of that as well, and men also are tied to their virility, right, which means literally to be a man, but to their virile aspect, to how can they, what we say, and I'm not sure you even have this, you may have to bleep it out, either fuck it or kill it. Can we do that? And we have lots of value, especially early on as men, and that gets established. I was an Air Force officer for 7 years, and that place of being in the military is very about that persona of can I kill it or fuck it kind of thing, and that's where you're a real man when you can do this kind of thing, and it's rewarding, and in so many ways. So if you carry that into midlife, I don't know how it is for women, but for men, I'll speak for me and my men group growing up, when we were going to bars and everything in my early 20s and so forth, and you saw that 45, 50 plus year old guy sitting there, doing a look at the youngers like, what is wrong with this guy? We all know that's not the appropriate place for him to be, and yet on the inside, if you're 55 years old, 6 years old, and your interior world is a 25-year-old, you may be looking. That may be the exact energy that you're holding. You're tied to. So can you mature that and go, okay? And a lot of times, daughters can help men move past that, hopefully, to go, okay, it's time for me to stop being so in that mode of being attracted and really putting sexual energy toward it. It's one thing to notice a beautiful woman, a beautiful 20-year-old woman. It's another thing to in your mind fantasize about that and hold that energy as though you're going to you're going to attract that, and you're going to get it, and you're going to take physically take her. Really different kind of energy to really hold the beauty and then let it go, not hold on to it. That's a different place. It's a really different energy.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm thinking it's kind of the shift from predator to protector.
Yeah, and again, I think in the early phases of when our testosterone is running heavy and we're really in the procreative stage, there is, there is an element of predation that is naturally in the men. We have to kind of hold that back. Hopefully, we hold that energy back because it can be so strong. So that then changes again as you get older. That's inviting a different place, and we have that, like anything that we let go of for men and women. It's like women letting go of that. Do I color my hair? Do I have the surgeries and stuff? Do I wear the Spanx? What kind of things do I do to keep that particular image of what a woman is? When do you set that down and go, okay, I'm really here as I am? That's why in this, the big push right now, as we're filming this, in the menopause and perimenopausal phases, the I don't care movement that's out there. And you got I love the millions of I don't care, I'm not going to do this, I'm not dressing up for that, I'm not showing up like this, it's the I don't care. Now that, there's probably some healthy steam being blown off by that, but that also it's not a healthy place to stay.
Right.
That doesn't nourish a relationship if you don't care about, I don't care about my husband, I don't care what his needs are, I don't care what he wants, so that doesn't sustain a relationship either. That's not a healthy place to be. You may think that, just like men may think certain things, but where is it you really want to show up and be? It's like, okay, the I don't care is like, okay, I'm done playing a particular role. Wow, that's a different place. That's a really powerful place for a woman to stand in. And that's where it can be disruptive for men, because we want to put our partners in boxes. We want them to be this. I know every day that Deborah's going to be like this. That's my, if she doesn't show up like that, that throws me off, right? That's like, what am I to expect? Now, how do I then react to that? And that's what menopause and perimenopause does. It just shakes it. It takes that snow globe and it shakes it. And it's like, now I don't know. Now I'm ungrounded. I don't know how to approach relationship. I don't know how to approach these tools that I've always done that you've appreciated are not what you need now, but I don't know what other tools, what other avenues to approach this from. And so we become unsettled and ungrounded, and women who in the place of I don't care, and I love when my wife talks about it, it is a place of coming into owning your power. You have to go through the decades worth of stuff that you stuffed down inside. That stuff tends to come up like a volcano.
Mm-hmm.
Metaphor, it just comes out, and it's messy and it's all over the place, and it's kind of hitting you hard as a man. If you're bending or running or shutting down or hiding from it, then she may feel like I can't let this loose on my husband, or he may not be there, or he's not the man to meet me in this journey. And so I think I may have mentioned this already, 70% of women in the midlife take action to divorce. Of all the divorces that happen in the United States, 70% come from women taking action, not men being in midlife crisis and jumping out. It's the 70% of women who take things like, I'm done with this. I've placated this. I'm pulled up with the bullshit long enough, and he's not changing, and it's like he's not growing. He wants to stay the little boy, he wants to stay the juvenile prince and not meet me where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Time for me to bounce. Now, maybe that's not the most healthy way to do things, but that is what comes up many times for the women.
And I think this is such the perfect place to introduce your tool, your conversations for midlife couples.
Yeah,
so
conversations every midlife couple must have. Yeah, so that's something I'm offering to your group here that I think is really an important foundational starting point for midlife couples to have these conversations, because there is this transition happening. There is this big change. And if you don't have a conversation, which we oftentimes don't, then we end up where we are. We end up at odds with each other. We end up assuming we're the same people that we were 25 years ago. And we wonder then as men on the backside, like, what do you mean you're divorcing me?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean you're stepping away? What do you mean? I mean, what's changed? Nothing's changed. Like, exactly, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
So absolutely the link will be in the show notes, and it's basically STEM conversations that you should have with your partner. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, it's conversation. It's the invitation. It's always an invitation, right? So within there are some core insights. There's 5 questions, 5 conversations, and really some insights on what things within those kind of conversations to hit. Some reflections for you to kind of reflect on, and then maybe like a ritual throughout that time frame to go. These are some. My wife and I are all about rituals. Again, rituals, rites, ceremonies, because they move us from one place to another. And so there's some invitations to doing some of that. And this, of course, is the setting up for the bigger programs that I work with men on, and we work with couples on, and so forth. And so I know that this is coming out somewhere, I'm not sure where, but it will be tied into what I call right now the King's Return,
Mm-hmm.
which is an 8-week online program to help men find those tools, work on themselves, do the inner work. The one thing about menopause and perimenopause is for women, for most women, not all women, but for most women, it's so intense that it forces you to do the work. It forces you to face that stuff again that you've stuffed down for decades. And for men, we don't have that push. So we have to choose to step into it and do the work. And that's what in the King's Return is part of that about. Again, moving from that juvenile, not a bad place, a really appropriate place at a particular phase of life to be in that princely energy, to upgrade, to change, to reflect, to do some inner work, and to approach your partner in a different way where you stand anchored, grounded, and can take the emotional hits and not have to take it on personally, not have to be a victim to it.
Mm-hmm.
Find what's coming up for you and work on those triggers, because that's your goal. That's where what's important for you, so that you can approach that next phase of life together in this really rich, deep place on the backside of menopause, which is a fabulous place to be with my wife. And she's in a deeper authenticity, a deeper richness, a deeper place of her own power. And I, to meet her there, have to up my game to be on equal footing with her.
Mm-hmm.
It naturally invites us into that place.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I'm curious. I mean, our conversation has been so rich and so full. If there's one thing that you want people to walk away with, what might that be?
Deborah, I would say that really to be vulnerable enough to have conversations that are meaning deep, rich. Where are you? Can you speak about what your needs are? Can you speak about what your, with me talking about my wife, it's like, man, I've got ED issues going on. My testosterone isn't driving me as much. I can't, I'm not engaged, so I'm nervous about engaging because I don't know if I can finish. Can you have those conversations so that you can both be vulnerable, and then she can soften and go, oh, okay, I get what you need out of this is something different than what's been in the past as well. And
Mm-hmm.
for her to speak her truth of like, hey, I need you to show up this way. It's like, oh, okay, well, how I've been doing it in the past is triggering you now in this new phase.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that I'm aware of this, but again, we're trying to reach each other's minds and keeping each other in the boxes that have always been there. So can we have, that's why the 5 conversations every midlife couple must have. I think it's a really great place to start of just digging into that and seeing where that takes you.
I am so excited about that, and I am absolutely going to try that with my own partner. Um, I love to this is one of the things that I love when I really hear something that sparks me, and it's like, oh great, I'll try this out with Neil to see how it works. So thank you so very much. Where can people find you?
Yeah, the best way is markjplatten.com or markplatten.com. So I'm sure you're going to put that in the show notes as well, so that it's all there.
Absolutely. And are you an Instagram, a Facebook kind of guy, or?
Well, generationally, I'm actually a Facebook guy, so I'm definitely on there, Mark J. Platten or Mark Platten. I think I've got both of them, but I'm definitely there. Although I don't post much because I'm not much of a social media guy, but either way, I'm there. I've got courses and programs, and you can find me. My wife is much easier to find, so. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been amazing. And for those of you listening and watching, if you know somebody who could use this information, because I'm not hearing people talk about this in very many places. Please pass it on. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let's have a conversation let's start the conversation. And thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next call, or the next place.
All right, sounds good, Deborah. Looking forward to connecting with you again.